Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Metkler.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Brian E. Roach, and I'm not going to say my normal intro because I'm now self-conscious. People made fun of me not liking toast and stuff, so I'm not even going to bring it up. I'm just going to say that I'm here. And normally, I'm joined on the podcast by my brother from another mother, Joseph Kuzma. But Joseph is in bed or something. I don't know. It's we're doing this a little later in the evening at this time, and he's just not around. He's got things to do. He's too busy to hang out with me. And so as a result, we're bringing in another one of our consistent contributors, and I'll tell you why. Because we're going to talk about draft, and that's something. The draft is something that this particular gentleman will talk about forever and always be happy with. It's his Christmas draft season. So we'd like to welcome the professor of football, one Zachariah Metkler. Back to the show. Zach, how you doing, man?
Not too bad. I mean, it's sad that the Steelers season's over, but like you said, this is literally the creme de la creme, if you would, of what I look forward to every single year. I mean, I live for this stuff. The draft is always my sweet spot, and honestly, if we could just fast forward and simulate the season every single year and just look forward to player evaluation, I think I would be pretty happy. But I don't think that would go well.
Get the hell out of here with that crap.
I know. It's asinine to think about, but that's where I sit.
I understand, and that is why you are the professor of football. So what we're going to look at in this particular episode is we're going to start talking about and thinking about the draft, because why not? It's either that or we'll talk, and we might take our little stabs at who's going to win the championships this weekend. But from the Steelers standpoint, it's all about looking ahead now. And there's been some conversations. Art Rooney II pretty much made it clear they're going to stay pat at quarterback. They're not looking at trying to draft one, probably, unless something dramatic happens, I guess. They're not looking to try and find another free agent out there. Ben's coming back, and they're going to stick with that. They did hire the quarterback's coach, Canada, and that's an interesting move. What's your take on that?
I think Chris Mack had the best take on this of the afternoon with that entire situation. I think if they wanted to get a quarterback coach to just coach and kind of just be the guy to help Mason Rudolph and whichever young guy they have behind Ben and him develop, they would have gone for a guy like Charlie Batch or a guy like Bruce Gradkowski, who I know has been trying to crack back into the coaching landscape since playing days. But I think you see that the track record Matt Canada has, and it's a lot of good things. Like first time it's Pitt. I mean, that Pitt offense was electrifying, and I had the pleasure of being able to watch that from a close view here in Pittsburgh during that year. But there are also some downsides. I know his time at Maryland is going to be looked at and frowned upon. His 1 year at LSU before, obviously we saw the explosion that we've seen this year from them was going to be frowned upon. But I think you're seeing a guy who has a lot of offensive traits that he likes to bring out in players. He's made guys like Jacoby Brissett, Nathan Peterman, players like that who really have no business being really sought after NFL quarterbacks at that point in time as college prospects, made them into players that teams were willing to spend draft capital on because of how he was able to use their strengths and utilize their stuff. And obviously he's not going to have that because he's not the offensive coordinator here, but you're bringing on a guy in the staff who has plenty of intriguing college experience on his resume to your quarterback room, to your offensive meeting room, to your offensive staff. I think that's going to really help at least potentially bounce some fresh ideas off there, because I don't think you can deny watching this offense last year with or without Ben's injury. There was a lot of staleness, if you will, to the entire offense. So I think realistically, this at least gives you an opportunity to have someone that has been around, has seen a lot of different types of systems, that's had a lot of success with the things that he does, to try and not only help guys like Mason Rudolph develop, or maybe even like a Duck Hodges develop, but also just add a little bit of different mindset to the offense to try to bring them back to that exciting style of Steelers offense they saw under Todd Haley.
All right, now we may as well start right there at the quarterback position, since that's what we've been talking about. And I'm on the record as not thinking that Ben's successor is in the building right now. I don't look at Mason Rudolph and see a potential franchise quarterback. I see a guy who might be a journeyman in the league or who could potentially be, a career backup. But I don't know that we've asked you that question yet. So, what do you look at when you look at Mason? Because I'm not even going down the Devlin Hodges road. I think he can have a career, but he's not going to be the guy that leads you to the promised land. When you look at Mason, what do you see? Do you see potential there? Do you see that he has the skill set or not?
I think, though, the term being a starting guy in the league kind of has it could be misleading. I don't think that realistically he's ever going to be a franchise quarterback where you're sitting there without any hesitation. This is the guy. There's no quarterback controversy. As long as we have him under contract, he's the dude. I think he could be a starting quarterback in the league for a team that's desperate, or a team like potentially the Steelers, where down the road Ben leaves, they're looking for a young guy. Because I don't envision the Steelers being a team that will ever be truly willing, at least under Tomlin and Colbert, truly willing to throw a rookie quarterback into the fire and hope for the best. So I think with that being said, Mason Rudolph could be potentially that bridge. I don't know if it'd be pretty. I'm still going to continue to believe that his best days are ahead of him. I think the adversity he faced in 2019 is going to be something that kind of hopefully propels him further down the road, to allow him to get to a point where he's seen the height of what he can do. A lot of good moments where you're like, that's a very NFL savvy move. And there was that stretch of about 4 weeks where, I think we all, I don't need to explain how we all felt during that stretch of times where we ultimately got benched for Devlin Hodges. But I think that type of adversity for a young quarterback and how I think he handled it well, and I think he handled it about as gracefully as you could potentially ask a guy to handle that, especially when you're being benched for an undrafted free agent rookie quarterback. I think he's going to hopefully take that and learn from it. And I think potentially having a coach like Matt Canada be able to help him as well in his development. If you can make Nate Peterman into a very effective quarterback, I'm convinced you can do that with just about anybody. So I think Mason Rudolph has a place in this league. I do believe it's going to be more as like a very high-end backup with starting experience and can potentially be a bridge between one quarterback and another for a franchise, potentially the Steelers when it gets to that point when Ben ultimately leaves. But I don't view him as anything more than an average level starting quarterback. I don't think he'll ever be the guy that we're ever putting in the conversation, even in like the Andy Dalton tier of quarterbacks that aren't elite, but they're not god awful. They're kind of just there floating in quarterback purgatory. I think he kind of fits that mold as his ceiling. And I don't know if he'll ever get to that point.
Yeah, I like that take. It's an interesting take that Mason Rudolph's ceiling is Andy Dalton.
Yeah, it's like that quarterback purgatory where no one ever, like, you could be good for a year or two, but no one's ever going to confuse you with Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like that awkward middle ground where you're going to have to start for a couple games and maybe a season or two until your head coach and GM gets tired of watching you every single week and says we need a young guy in there to spark this franchise.
Yeah. All right. So now that being said, Ben's under contract till 2021 or something like that. And in theory, he's going to come back. We hope he's going to come back effective and strong. We did a show, I think 2 shows ago, talking about why the Steelers are not in a quarterback panic and why we're not overly concerned with potentially, all these Heisman candidates or Heisman winners being in the AFC North, because we're going to have Ben. And boy, did we get a lot of flack for that. And we continue to get flack for that every time we talk about the fact that we're glad Ben's still around. But one of the things that I keep reading out there on the interwebs is that one of the offseason needs the Steelers have is quarterback, and I don't agree with that. So to me, there are other holes that need to be filled. Where they're drafting is a part of that issue. You're not going to find, look, I get it, the Tom Brady thing, but the chances of you finding that diamond in the rough down there are slim to next to none. And the idea of when you have limited draft capital, as they are going to have in 2020, wasting that on a guy who probably can't even make the roster at this point doesn't make sense to me. You see it any differently than that?
No, I think especially when you look at this class, I mean, there's really nothing in this class from any of these quarterbacks that I'm saying they're saying, you know what, I see a all-world talent that could come in day one and change this franchise. I mean, the closest one to that at this point is Joe Burrow, and even then, I don't. As much as I like Joe Burrow, I don't view him as a guy that's ever going to be in the same category as a top tier Russell Wilson, Pat Mahomes kind of guy. I don't view him as being that level of quarterback, but I think he's going to be a very effective quarterback for a long time. I think he just has enough traits. The accuracy you can't deny. You can't look at any of the leadership ability, the arm strength, his mobility, which is very deceptive. He has all those things. He doesn't do really anything tremendously terribly. So I think that's why he is the consensus number one at this point and will likely be a Bengal. But outside of Burrow, there's no quarterback in this class right now where I'm tipping my hat and saying, I'm going to put all the eggs into the basket. This is our dude. He's going to change our franchise. Now, I'm not saying that these guys can't do that. But when you look back to like the 04 class, I mean, everyone pretty much felt pretty confident about Rivers, Manning, and Ben. I mean, like I don't think there was any concern about those three guys. I think it was just a matter of what flavor of quarterback you wanted. I think the belief at that point was pretty much all those guys were going to have somewhat successful careers. And no one in this class strikes me as being that guy. And I think when you have the needs that you can really kind of go and restock other positions and really try to maximize this window you have right now with Ben, whether it's this upcoming season or if he does make it through the next 2 years healthy at a high level, you have to add talent around him that's going to be able to maximize that window, that's going to be able to give him help on offense, continue to reload this defense, which we saw make the jump it did this year to an elite unit. I don't think you can afford to waste the already minimal draft capital you have on a quarterback unless something catastrophic happens and Joe Burrow falls and is sitting there at number 49. That's about the only way that would happen. And obviously, if he falls past one, you're going to have an arms race to get up to number 2 to take him. Yeah. So I don't envision any scenario in which that happens. I'm sure there's people that love guys like Tua and Justin Herbert and Jordan Love. I like those prospects as a developmental guy who can maybe take over a franchise one day, but I don't think any one of those is the heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger or will ever truly be a top-tier quarterback in the NFL.
All right. So with that being said, let's just put that quarterback position off to the side and just say, look, at least for probably the next 2 seasons, the Steelers have their quarterback. Now, when we look at what they have this year, draft-wise, obviously we know that we already did our first-round draft pick. We got Minkah Fitzpatrick. We've got a second-round pick. At the exact moment while we're recording this, we don't have a third-round pick, but we expect to get a compensatory, whatever that word is. Compensatory. Thank you. See, he's the professor. A compensatory pick in the third round for Le'Veon Bell. So we expect to have a third-round pick. We got 1 pick in the fourth. We don't have a fifth-round pick. We got a sixth, and we got a seventh. So you're talking about very limited capital. Now, for what we have, and if the right person was there, let's look at this, because I've also seen speculative articles out there about jumping back up into the first round, the Steelers jumping back up into the first round with somebody like the Colts or Jacksonville or maybe even in Seattle. But is there a need for them to do that? I mean, clearly, yes, they're good players up there, but when we look at the way the roster is currently filled out, do they have a desperate need to jump up into the first round? My view on that is I don't think that they do. I also don't think they're going to play that game where they're going to expend capital in future years to try and move up, because that's what they'd have to do. They're probably not going to package a player in a deal, and that usually doesn't work anyway. So I not only do I think it's pure nonsense to expect them to move back up into the first round, I don't think they have the draft capital to really do it.
No, I think it would take some amazing talent to start falling in the draft that the Steelers are very high on and know they obviously have no chance of getting, for them to even consider that to be the case. And right now, I know a lot of fans like to think that there is a lot of glaring needs on this team. They're really, right now, I think the fact that there's even this much debate on what the top need is shows that there's not a whole lot of needs. Like last year, everybody knew that inside linebacker was going to be, if not the top target, one of the 2 top targets. Trying to fill that hole that Ryan Shazier left after he got injured. I don't see any hole right now that is so unbelievably pressing that you have to give up a decent amount of draft capital to jump from 49 all the way up into the first round just to get this one guy who is going to be picked in the range of, at the back end first rounder who realistically is probably an early second rounder, because that's the type of value you tend to get in that end point of the first round. I don't envision the Steelers wanting to do that. I'd be amazed if they did, especially when you have such limited capital to begin with. You're going to want to stock up on guys, especially with some of the free agents you have coming up. You're going to want to stock guys at positions, hope you find some diamonds in the rough on day 2, day 3, and kind of go from there. So I'd be stunned. I don't envision anything. I mean, Colbert has kind of flexed his muscles over the last year and trading up for Devin Bush, spending all the money on Steven Nelson and also acquiring Minka Fitzpatrick. I'd be amazed if he was willing to take that risk this year for any capacity. Now, a move up could be in the cards for like day 2, but I don't see a day 1 move jump for the Steelers.
Yeah, I just agree with that. I just don't think I don't think it's necessary, first of all, and I don't think it's likely. It just doesn't fit the mold of what they tend to do. So, all right. That being said, we know we're going to have basically picks in the 2nd through 7th round, other than the 5th. We assume that, as I said, assuming we get the compensatory pick. I don't like that word. I'm just going to call it the Bell pick from now on. When you think about, as you said, and I agree with you to a certain extent. I don't believe there is a glaring need on this team right now, with the assumption that Ben comes back, because I think Ben coming back fixes a lot of problems that were evident this year based on bad quarterback play. But I think there are areas where, as we've talked about in past episodes, there is some risk. So, we've gone over who are the free agents this year. You got guys like Vance McDonald, B.J. Finney. I'll say Artie Burns is a free agent, but who cares? Bud is the big issue. I know you care. I care about Jay Wobble, Javon Hargrave, Vanette, Kennedy, Matt Filer, Mike Hilton, Latarius Walton, Matakevich, Banner, Marcus Allen, just to name a few, right? And we've speculated that there are potential cap casualties, like potentially Ramon Foster. But Art II in his media interview also was very clear that Bud Dupree is a priority for them. And so, in my mind, if Bud leaves, if they can't keep him, and they seem to think that they'll be able to do something, even if it's the franchise tag. Even though right now everybody looks at it and goes, they don't have the cap room even to do the franchise tag. I think they have an idea of what the cap elevation is going to be, and they know that they'll probably be able to at least do that if they can't figure out a longer-term deal with Bud. But we'll proceed with the assumption that Bud resigns and he's still here next year. But if he's not, all of a sudden there's a hole. And that becomes their glaring need to get somebody for edge. And you and I have chatted about this in the back rooms as well as a lot of other people, with a lot of things that we don't know. We don't know what they think of Ola. We don't know what they think of Skipper. We don't know, whether they see those guys as being able to potentially step in or whether they don't. We don't know how well they look at those guys. I can tell you that I think Ola, when he played okay, but it wasn't Bud Dupree. And I don't know that gets turned around as quickly. So would you agree or disagree that if that's the case, if Bud's not re-signed, that's what they're going to focus on, because that's the biggest need they'll have?
Yeah, I think edge is the one spot where I look at as being that need if Bud is or decides to walk in free agency and doesn't want to sign the tag, or decides to just leave, or they don't apply the tag at all. Just because of the fact that you saw how disruptive that tandem could be, and you're assuming that you're getting Stephon Tuitt back at 100% with Cam Hayward. I mean, you saw how effective that was this year. Why do you want to disrupt that, especially with this window being so small now? While you still have Ben, you really effectively have 2 years to kind of maximize this. And I think that's kind of the mindset of the Steelers. They're probably going to want to hope to get the franchise tag applied, try to get something worked out long-term with him, or at least have him for 1 year while you still have TJ Watt on a cheap deal and then kind of flip-flop that. Then you have him on his fifth-year option, try to work out a long-term deal with Watt, and then let Dupree walk into the sunset while you're looking at Ben's career in Pittsburgh coming to an end. But I think as it stands currently with Dupree, I do have a feeling, as much as I've been skeptical of it, I think if they're able to get the tag on him, I think they would be willing to do that, because I think they are serious about keeping him, especially over a guy like Hargrave, and potentially even a guy like Mike Hilton, because Dupree's it was so imperative in everything they did this year in the box. So I think realistically, he does walk, it's edge. I still think even if they do re-sign him, I still think edge is going to be a position they do go and try to select this year, just because you're going to need some potential depth, because Chicola's on his last year. You still don't really know what they have in Ola or Skipper, so you could still use to add some quality depth behind there via the draft and some young talent from the college pool. But I think edge is going to be their top need if they don't re-sign Bud. But right now, with the fact that he still seems to be very firmly entertained in the idea of being in the picture, I struggle to make that their top need as it currently stands while we're doing this show right now.
All right, so let's go out on a limb now and talk about what we think their actual real top need is. And I am, I've said it, I'm going to continue to say it, I am JK all day. That is what I am, and I like James Conner a lot. I like when he's healthy how he runs. The problem is he's not healthy most of the time, and that's been the case for 3 years now, with the number of games that he's missed, and that concerns me. I'm not against Benny Snell, but to me, I want a running back. And I want a very specific running back. I want J.K. Dobbins, and I don't want anybody else. But I look at if I'm really hard pressed, and I say this is what they need to help, not just because I worry about the stability at that position, but because it would be nice to have some depth there for next year when Connor's rookie deal is done. That's where I sit. And my second fit for that is probably somebody on the interior of the offensive line, because offensive line is always important to me, as it is to you. So that's where I go. Either at running back or an offensive lineman. If I was picking on this team, what do you look at when you look at the Steelers, the way they're made up right now, and what you think is going to help them the most to maximize that potential during those next 2 years with Ben? Where are you going to go?
I really think that not even just for Ben's win, but if you're looking long term at whatever quarterback you have replace Ben down the road within the next couple of seasons, the offensive line is getting to a point where we've seen this success we've had with Pouncey, DeCastro, Villanueva, Foster, Filer, Gilbert, Kelvin Beachum. You name an offensive lineman that's played for the Steelers or started for the Steelers, BJ Finney, over the last 5-6 years, the Steelers have been up there and amongst the elite, if not the elite unit of the NFL when it comes to offensive line play. But at some point in time, the wheels do fall off. And right now, the only offensive lineman that's on the team that I feel is truly engraved in elite long-term performance production is Dave DeCastro. I think Pouncey is still playing at an effective level. I'm not one of these people that think he's falling off because of the snaps. I think the snaps got a little bit overbloated while they were concerning. I don't think it's anything more than just a rhythm issue. But I see guys like Foster potentially being a cap casualty, depending on how the Steelers want to view his contract. If they want to save someone, because they could save some by moving on, and he is getting older. He's on the wrong side of 33 at this point. BJ Finney is going to be an unrestricted free agent this year. He could realistically test the market, and I think he would get starting caliber guard money. I think he can net between $4 and $5 million a year just based on his experiences in Pittsburgh. I don't think that would be entirely out of the question. At minimum, $3 million. You have a situation where moving forward to next season, you have Alger Villanueva that's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's going to be 32. You have Ramon Foster. If you don't cut him this year, you're probably not going to re-sign him next year because he'll be 35. And he's starting to lose his step, in my opinion. So we're getting to a point now where you don't know if you're going to keep Filer long-term, because Filer's not young either. He's been around for a little bit, but he's still in the prime of his career. So you have to at some point start acknowledging the issues in depth that you have on the offensive line, because I love Zach Banner. I love what he was able to bring as the extra offensive lineman this year. I still have hesitations of wanting to support him as a pass protector. I think he's very effective in the run game. Chukwuma Okorafor, who I've been very high on, I think realistically is a project still. I think he could get the right tackle job and do well there, but I don't know if he's ever going to be a dude that you can reliably count on long term, because we still haven't seen his best production on the field, because he's still growing as a football player, since he's still so new to the game since moving to the United States. And beyond that, a lot of these undrafted free agent types that they have on the practice squad or whatever, I don't view them as anything at this point. I don't see another Ramon Foster or another Alejandro Villanueva. So I think that all being said, if you want to keep Ben healthy, if you want to make the life of whatever running back ends up being in the backfield over the next 3 years, you want to make whatever quarterback comes after Ben upright and healthy and more comfortable to go through their reads, you need to start putting resources back into the offensive line. I know the window's there now. You have these guys that are there, but you can't rely on these people forever. I think at some point, whether you address the interior offensive line or tackle, I really don't care. I would be amazed if they get through this entire offseason, or at least the draft, without adding some upper tier offensive lineman, because you have to start restocking. If you let the offensive line get to a point where Pouncey leaves whenever Ben does, Alejandro Villanueva ends up going, and you end up cutting Foster and not being able to retain Finney, your entire offensive line's gone to shambles overnight. You can't afford to have that happen. And I think the offensive line play this year was a little bit overdone when teams are loading the box as frequently as they were, because no one was ever going to trust Mason Kevin Hodges to throw downfield. So let's just put 8 men in the box and force you to make a throw one-on-one with our Pro Bowl corner on the outside, which most teams that have any kind of competent cornerback play are going to take that chance against Rudolph or Hodges. So I think this year's performance was more of a blip on the radar more than it was what's bound to come. But you still have to restock it. I know offensive line play is never going to be a sexy pick, as Eric so lovely told us in the background recently. But I think the offensive line being formidable and being an elite unit is what's helped make this entire offense click over the recent years. And if you want to continue to have that trend be a thing for the future of this team past Ben's career here, you have to put stock into it now. I would not be upset at all if the first pick in the draft was an offensive lineman in some capacity.
Oh, neither would I. As I said, I mean, that's my second level. But my Buckeye internal nature is going to say I want J.K. Dobbins and I want J.K. all day. That's my bias.
Yeah.
And I don't know that. I mean, there's so much time in between now and then, and we don't know what kind of combines these guys are going to have. It won't surprise me if J.K. is well gone before they get to the second round pick there. And so I would not at all be opposed to the non-sexy pick of the offensive lineman. But I'm going to take issue with that statement and our resident secondary millennial, Mr. Eric, and tell him it is a sexy pick. Offensive linemen are sexy, man. It's a sexy pick.
You want to watch Patrick Mahomes do what he does? Or you want to watch any of the receivers do what they do? The running backs put up all these gaudy yards. Why does that stuff happen? Offensive line play.
That's right. And Zach Adonia, your cousin from another muzzin. I don't know what that means. Zach Adonia is he's our offensive guy. All he really wants is receivers and big play guys.
The boring stuff.
You need O linemen, Zach. You just do. So all right. So we both kind of are on the same page there. But to go beyond that, if you had to reach down now into the second level of what they might need, for me, it's probably the defensive line, or as you were talking about, maybe edge depth. The defensive side of the ball. Look, I'll be thrilled if Stephon Tuitt comes back and is fully healthy, but again, he's a guy who's had an injury bug issue, and it oftentimes seems it's a similar injury issue. He's got, I don't know what the deal is, but he seems to tear those pecs or do something to his chestages area. Seems almost yearly, and it's always after he's been doing gangbusters. He's like having a Pro Bowl level year, and then he gets hurt, or he's out of the gang, coming out of the gates firing off. But I'm going to keep my hope up because he's still a fairly young guy. I'm going to keep my hope up that he's able to come back and is able to perform at that kind of level. But we're likely gonna lose Jay Wobble. I hope they can sign him. I hope that they keep him. But I have a feeling he showed enough this season filling in for Stephon Tuitt that he's just gonna be priced out of anything they can do. I have that same concern with B.J. Finney as well, and I have a grave concern that they cannot afford to lose both Foster and Finney. That troubles me if that happens. Yeah. But I would look at that defensive line trying to get again some more. I don't know how. I thought Isaiah Buggs played relatively well. But has room for growth, but I don't know that I want to count on Isaiah Buggs to step in and be a contributor, right? So I look at defensive line as maybe that's the next area. Edge, for the very reasons you said, I think Anthony Chickillo, if there is a cap casualty, it's Anthony Chickillo. He makes a good amount of money, and he does not contribute a whole hell of a lot. He's in there. He gives them snaps, but do you ever see anything happen on those snaps? Very rarely. So I don't know that they're getting the kind of production that they would certainly like. So I think that's where I would head after that if I was pushing the needle there. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I go back and forth with the D-line thing. I know I've had this conversation in the back rooms, but I think you do have to be concerned about both Tuitt and Hayward's health. I mean, Hayward's getting older and he's had injury bugs, but he's stayed largely healthy during his career, minus his torn pectoral muscle a while back. And obviously Tuitt has been bitten by the injury bug more than once in his career as well. That being said, I think even though you're losing Hargrave played the most snap there, the highest percentage of snaps he's played in his career this past season. I will blame a lot of that on the Steelers' willingness to go to D lineman and utilize him on the outside, outside being like a 3-tech. But I think realistically, you have snaps you're losing with him, but as long as Tuitt and Hayward are healthy, you still have Alualu. I like Buggs' production towards the end of the year more than you were indicating. I think he is always going to leave somewhat stuff to be desired as a pass rusher, but I think you don't need him to be a pass rusher necessarily. I think what you see from Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt is just bonus. I don't think it's necessarily the mandate, especially when you have edge presence and middle linebackers that can blitz like Mark Barron, Vince Williams, and Devin Bush, and obviously T.J. Watt and Dupree, depending on his future. So I'm not putting as much of a high emphasis on D-line because I think if you use that 49th pick or their expected third-round compensatory pick on an interior defensive lineman or just a D lineman in general, you have an opportunity for a guy to potentially make some impact. But barring injury, you can't expect that guy to really come in there and do a whole lot. I thought whenever Tuitt went down, the D-line didn't really skip a beat, and that's no knock on Tuitt because when Tuitt was playing, I thought Tuitt was playing on a Pro Bowl, potentially an all-pro caliber level before he got hurt. I think if he would have stayed healthy, it would have been a huge, even better season for the Steelers. But I think when you saw the kind of not really drop off and play with Alualu and Buggs in there, and even a guy like Big Dan McCullers, I thought played halfway decently. I just don't envision D-line being a huge need, even with the loss of Javon Hargrave. And I hate saying that because I do love D-line play almost as much as I love offensive line play. So it pains me to say that. But I do think there's enough depth. And you have a guy like Henry Monado on the practice squad, who I think the team's very high on. And, they're always bringing in bodies during that. So I don't expect them to go D-line. The one spot that I think they could entertain that I'm not entirely sold on them going because I'm not as high on this class would be tight end. And I know and that's not because I think they're going to get rid of McDonald, because I don't think they're going to get rid of McDonald as much as fans think they are. I'm not sold on Gentry. Xavier Grimel's no longer on the roster. Don't know what they're going to do with Nick Vannett, if they can even afford to re-sign him, depending on if he tries to pursue Jesse James type money. Christian Scotland Williamson, I think, had a decent camp next year and is sticking around and learning the game to the point where he could be a very good depth player, but he's never going to be the guy. That being said, you have to entertain the idea of finding somebody that could potentially be a cheaper more reliable health-wise option than McDonald down the road. Rookie tight ends always struggle to acclimate to the NFL. I mean, even guys like Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz and George Kittle, they did halfway decently as rookies, but they weren't doing what they were doing now. With the way college football is set up, you have these guys that are playing in pure spread systems, air raid systems, and they're air quote tight ends. But they're not asked to do all the things that tight ends in the league do. They're not asked to inline block nearly as much. And typically, if you're a good inline blocker, you probably weren't asked to go out and run routes very much, which is how tight ends are used so much in the league today. So I think that being said, you have to draft a tight end. I think the Steelers' situation would be better to draft a tight end to be able to have him behind McDonald, potentially behind Gentry while he continues to learn being a tight end because he's only 3 years into his stint in that capacity. And hope you get a guy that could be the future of the position because I don't think Gentry is that guy. I do like him. I think he's a nice number 2 tight end or number 3 tight end. I don't think he'll ever be the starter. But McDonald's just not reliable health-wise. And I don't think that's all necessarily his fault. But it's getting to a point where you're paying him this money and he can't stay on the field for more than 12 games a season, 11 games a season. You're going to have to start looking for options there. My only reservation is that I'm not big on this class. There are some nice tight ends, but none of which I think are going to be worth the value, which the Steelers would have to select some of them, which is going to kind of dampen their entire thing. So I think tight end is the one position where this year and down the road could and should be a need, but I don't see them really having the opportunity to kind of push on for any person there, especially if they just drafted Gentry last season.
Yeah, that was next in line for me for that very reason. I don't know enough about the tight end class yet to make a determination of what I think. I will just say I don't feel like anybody knocked my socks off so far.
No.
And I kind of am viewing this as I agree. They're not going to get rid of Vance McDonald. I just don't see that happening because it leaves them too strapped at that position. You can't go into the season depending on Gentry and maybe Vannett, and if not Vannett, because you can't re-sign him, Gentry and who knows. You're just not gonna be able to do that. So I don't anticipate Vance McDonald going anywhere. I like Vance McDonald. I think getting Ben back all of a sudden will elevate the tight end play all by itself. We'll see. But I read somewhere that somebody said, Vance McDonald is living off that stiff arm. And there's probably a little bit of truth to that. It was a big splash moment, and it made a big deal. But you haven't seen the kind of explosiveness or the kind of, busting the seam or stretching the field or just being, that safety net that you kind of need a tight end to be out of him. But again, I kind of got to give him a pass this year, not even just because of the injuries issues, but because they just almost didn't have tight end in their game plan for these quarterbacks. So I don't know. But I agree that to me, that's a need. Now's when, when you get past that, though, and you start looking at what else can they do, the one that always funnels up because they do it every single year is receiver. And I look at this and I am more than pleasantly surprised with how Deontay Johnson played this year. Not that I didn't expect him to be decent, but he acclimated himself well. He started to become much more involved as time went on. I think the experience he got this year pays huge dividends. I get that everybody's disappointed in Juju, but I think he battled injuries throughout the year, and we'll see. I don't know. I'm with you on this, because you and I, you've said this in the back room several times, and I agree with you completely. To me, Juju is the most effective out of the slot. He's a big slot receiver. Not that he can't play on the outside, but that's where I think he's the most effective. On the other hand, I think Deontay Johnson could play anywhere and be effective. But is James Washington gonna be a consistent number 3? Is somebody else on that roster going to step up? And they always draft a receiver. They just always draft a receiver. So I kind of think that's where they might lean next as they look around. It could be a guy. I think it's a value And quite honestly, I think there's a good chance that a lot of these picks just become BPA for the Steelers, depending on what's there. Slide the quarterbacks out of there, but barring, like you said, barring something ridiculous, like, I don't know, there's somebody flaunts pictures of Joe Burrow exposing himself to squirrels. And, all of a sudden he's there at 50 or 49, wherever they end up picking. And, none of that's going to happen. So, I think it's probably likely that they just take the best player available regardless because, as you said, the needs are limited. But I think a receiver would probably fall into there. And then as they get down in there, linebacker and kind of replenishing maybe some special teams guys. Do you see anything else on the defense that becomes a concern? And I know the position that a lot of fans are going to talk about and people, because man, the Terrell Edmunds hate is strong at this point, and so people are going to want a safety. I just don't see that as I'm not. They're not ready to give up on him. I don't think and I'm not ready to give up on Edmunds. Give him another season playing with Mika and this defense. Everybody isn't going to be a superstar, but I think he can be a solid key here. I don't know that that's a desperate need, but after we get past that tight end or wherever, where else are you looking at this team?
Oh, speaking of Edmunds, and maybe I'm just saying this because I've defended him for as much as I have. I mean, remember he's still 22.
Yeah,
he won't turn 23 until the 20th of January. So he's still a young guy. I mean, and the thing with him, he makes mistakes. I'm not going to defend him because he hasn't been perfect. I mean, like when it comes to coverage, he was sometimes left a lot to be desired there. There were a couple of tackles where you're kind of left scratching your head, but the effort is there. Very seldom did you see him just taking plays off. And keep in mind, people don't really truly understand and conceptualize. He went into the season expecting Sean Davis to be the guy next to him. Sean Davis goes down. He spends the first 2 weeks of the season playing with Cam Kelly. Cam Kelly ends up not producing the way he needs to, and he gets thrown into the fire with Minka Fitzpatrick, who obviously is an All-Pro and is probably going to be a perennial Pro Bowler and a perennial All-Pro his entire career, barring some unforeseen regression during his time in the league. That's going to take some time to continue to develop, and you can't just blossom that automatically in season because safeties play off of each other. I look whenever the Steelers had Troy Polamalu, Chris Tope leaves, and they're looking for somebody else to fill that role next to it and bring in Ryan Clark. Ryan Clark comes in there, and the first year together, it wasn't always the fireworks and electric. It took really a year of them being together for them to really understand each other, work off each other, and kind of feel that. And a lot of the stuff that would go on with Edmunds this year were coverage breakdowns, whether it was him, whether it was the corners on the outside. He got thrown the short end of the straw a couple times on some kind of questionable calls. I'm not going to throw up my arms in disgust with him yet. He's still a young guy. I thought he took some steps forward, just not the steps that you would like to see from your former first-round pick. So I think realistically he still has a lot to offer. I think Minka Fitzpatrick continuing to develop in this system is only going to help. And I say continue to develop as if he didn't do enough this year. Clearly he did enough this year. But I think him having a full offseason, knowing he is the Steelers' free safety, he is the Steelers' all-pro defensive back, that's only going to help Edmunds. I mean, Edmunds, you can make the argument, was the weak spot of that defense last year. But when you're playing with guys at all levels, because you can make an argument for a lot of these dudes that should have been Pro Bowlers. You can make the argument Devin Bush should have been. Obviously, T.J. Watt.
Steven Nelson.
You can make arguments for all these dudes and all the levels could have been Pro Bowlers. So there's always going to be a scapegoat because they're not going to have 11 top-tier players on their defense. So I get the hate with Edmunds, but I'm not pumping the brakes yet. I mean, this time last year, we were having the same conversation regarding Bud Dupree, and now everyone wants to give Bud Dupree a contract. So you have to be patient. Not every single person comes out there and it turns into a Jamal Adams, where he comes in year one as a Pro Bowl safety for the Jets, and he's doing all these things. Bud Dupree, everyone wanted to be a cap casualty last year. They exercised his fifth-year option, and everyone wants to fire Colbert, and now they're begging for that. We need to find a way to keep him. Who's to say that Terrell Edmunds is not going to have that type of jump next season, where we're sitting there saying this is one of the most pleasant surprise players in the league? when it comes to what he's doing in his position. So be patient. If we're having this conversation at the end of his time with the Steelers, like we are Artie Burns, where Artie Burns is likely out the door, then yeah, we can have this conversation, but relax. That being said, getting off my high horse, the defensive needs, I think, for the Steelers, I think they could potentially address corner. I know that seems like a dumb need. I just look at the fact that, like, you don't know if you're going to keep Mike Hilton. I mean, I think they're going to try to keep Mike Hilton. I think Dupree's their biggest priority. Mike Hilton is a guy they want to keep. I think they understand that the writing's on the wall. Javon Hargrave. They'd love to keep all three, but we have to be real with the situation. They have to be real with the situation. I think you have Mike Hilton potentially leaving. You have a situation where Artie Burns is more than likely out the door. Cameron Sutton is heading into the last year of his rookie contract. So you don't know what you're going to have with him. You still don't know what you have with Justin Lane because he's a raw corner. While he had some nice moments during the preseason, is he ever going to be a guy? He's firmly an outside corner. He's not an inside guy. So you have some issues there with your depth. I don't think it's a high need. I don't think it's a need where you need to select early, but I think it would be beneficial to add a body there. I mean, you're pretty much set with Nelson and Hayden for the next couple seasons. And obviously you still have Sutton, but the depth is kind of going to go for the wayside here in very short order, depending on what happens with Hilton and Burns. So I don't think it would be a hurt thing to go and draft a cornerback, or at least entertain the idea of drafting a quarterback day 2, day 3, seeing if you can get something there, because you can never have too many good corners, especially if someone like Hayden, who's had some injury issues in the past, goes down. All of a sudden you go from having your Pro Bowl corner to having nobody. So that's really the only defensive position outside of maybe adding some D-line depth, even though I don't think it's pressing, or an edge defender. I don't think they need to address inside linebacker this year. I think they're good in that situation. I don't think they have to draft the safety unless they do it later on. I think that was the entire point of going out and getting Minkah Fitzpatrick. So if I had to pick one position that no one's talking about that they could address at some point, it would be corner.
Yeah. All right. So, and I think that's, once you get past, the fourth round here in this draft, you're talking about role players for the most part, and they could end up anywhere. They're going to take guys that they just like and they think can either grow for the future or, contribute on special teams. But I want to kind of tear us away from the rest of that, because I think we've covered what the majority of their draft needs are. But we talked earlier on about the fact that it won't be a bad thing for this team if what they really end up doing is stockpiling talent for the future. And it's pretty simple if you take a look at the free agent class that they have this year, and also then jump ahead to next year. And again, this is a topic that we've been chatting about in the back rooms consistently. But we talked about who's going to be an unrestricted free agent this year. But look at 2021: Joe Hayden, Cam Hayward, Villanueva, Mark Barron, Foster, Chickalo, Alu, McCullers, Juju, Cam Sutton, James Conner. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. That's a huge group of guys, and they may find ways, once the collective bargaining agreement gets signed and they know what they're into, they may find ways to restructure some of these guys. They may find ways to keep them. But this is what we're talking about when the Steelers are in a position right now where they just don't have dire depth unless they lose Bud. And it's worthwhile to start thinking about what do we got to do in years coming up. Because you like we just went through what they had in 2021, but you start to get to 2022 and you're talking about DeCastro and Pouncey and Roethlisberger and Nelson. Minkah will have a club option. TJ, could be an unrestricted free agent. James Washington, it's a limited window that they have to operate on, and this is the time for them to start. Restocking, so to speak. I know you've talked about it, the difference between where this team is now and where this team may be in 3 years, and what that might look like and how that translates into what they need to do in the draft now and maybe next year. So go ahead and expand on that and do a soliloquy, Professor.
So, I think we're getting to a phase right now beyond even just Ben's window where this team could be very unrecognizable within by 2022. I mean, you have a scenario right now where while we have guys like Joe Hayden and Cam Hayward who are still playing at a high level, you have guys like Alawalu who have been very quality depth. We have guys like Vance McDonald who, when he's healthy, is a very effective tight end. Moving forward there, like in 2022, we have a situation where Pouncey and DeCastro and Nelson and Vince Williams and Minka Fitzpatrick and these guys at Roosevelt Knicks, they're all free agents. And I'm not saying they're all going to walk, because obviously the Steelers are going to re-sign these guys, or at least some of these guys. But we're to a point now where you have to consider the age of these players. I know Joe Hayden wants to finish his career in Pittsburgh, but when his contract is up, he's going to be 32 years old. Cam Hayward, I'm sure, only wants to play in Pittsburgh, and I think he will be an option to re-sign. But at what value and what's his health going to be like if he keeps getting banged up? These aren't straightforward questions. I know it's very easy in our mind to say, oh, well, these guys are at that point in their career, they're going to take a pay cut to stay with the team that they've been with. And that's not always the case, because especially at that point, you want to maximize whatever you have left in the tank while still being loyal to the team that's been loyal to you, while also still wanting to win some games. So when you get past a certain point, it all becomes a tricky equation to kind of navigate. So when you have the Steelers looking this season in the face where they have the ability to kind of go best player available, what they think are people and positions they can actually go and use and stockpile for the future, it might not be sexy right now, but the opportunity for these guys to get learning experience without being thrown into the fire is what made Steelers teams under Cowher and early on in Tomlin's career. And these players are able to go and learn how to be professionals. They're able to learn the system in a very low-pressure environment because they have veterans playing above them. The Steelers have the opportunity right now to take some of these guys, put them in positions where they can go and learn behind veterans like Cam Hayward, Joe Hayden, Alejandro Villanueva, Marquise Pouncey, Ben Roethlisberger, even a guy like Juju, who is a veteran, albeit his age might not indicate as such. You have these opportunities to get guys to learn in these low-pressure environments so that whenever the time comes and their numbers are called, you hope that they can be the guy. And that's how we've seen the Steelers operate, to the point where they, even in the years when they're going 8-8, they're not really rebuilding. They're just restocking the shelves. They're kind of refueling the car. They're not actually going through and doing a complete overhaul, because they have enough talent built up behind the elite talent they already have in place to learn. So I think when you look at it, the Steelers are in a position where a lot of their success, I truly believe, over the next 2 years or 1 year, depending on how it all plays out, is going to be based squarely on Ben's shoulders, which puts them into a situation where it's very similar in my mind to what they did whenever they selected Ben in 2004, when they were a very effective team and in the AFC Championship game, or whatever it was at that point, leading up to that point, and all of a sudden wheels fall off. Cordell Stewart loses his magic. Tommy Maddox is Tommy Maddox. And you have a situation where all of a sudden now you're in a position to draft a quarterback very early on, because in one season you kind of just took this downward spiral to 6-10 and put yourself in a spot to pick number 11 for Ben. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. The Steelers can do that, but they can help whatever quarterback they potentially do, where maybe Mason is the future and we're all just too blind to it, and he actually clicks on and he's a very high-end quarterback and we just don't know it yet. Maybe he's the bridge, like I said earlier in this podcast, about he's the bridge to a guy that we can bring on later on and potentially be the person, but you don't have to put him into the wolves just yet. That being said, I think we've seen enough at this point to know that if Mason Rudolph has to start over a long period of time, if he doesn't take any monstrous steps forward, it's not going to be a pretty situation for the Steelers, which with the talent they have could set them up nicely to be in a position to strike and move up the board a little bit, kind of like they do with Devin Bush, or to move up and be in a position to actually take a quarterback that they need to help, that they like a lot, to move forward with the franchise that they haven't had the opportunity to really do since they selected Ben in 2004. I don't think any way you look at this, it's going to be a bad scenario, as long as you continue to stock your team with talent at the spots where you can afford to do it right now, because you have the depth and you have the already starting talent there, so that whenever the situation comes and you're looking at a spot where you have to replace Ben, because whether fans would admit it or not, we're much closer to that point than we are farther away from it. So I think realistically you have to start preparing for that to happen. The way you can prepare for that is to put a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback into a scenario where he has a lot of talent around him with experience, with some youth and excitement to make his life easier, which again, going back is why I think the offensive line is still the biggest part they need to fill. So I think you have a scenario where you could go one way or the other. So I don't think you're necessarily going to need to tank either. I think we're to a point where the Steelers' wheels fall off because these guys are getting older and some of these players might not even be in the team in 2022 whenever they're all free agents. The tanking part might just come easy. I mean, the tanking part might just be the fact that this wouldn't be a good football team at that point. You have no way of knowing. But I think you have a position where you can kind of make that move easier. So if they do get a scenario where they're 6-10, go like they were in 2004, you feel comfortable about being able to pull the trigger on a first-round quarterback instead of settling for a guy who falls into the first round or doing what they do with Mason Rudolph, or like you suggested earlier, as fans have thrown out there, taking one of these guys like a Jordan Love at 49 and expecting him to be the savior. So I think the Steelers are in a window of opportunity right now where the Steelers we've known over the last decade are quickly coming to an end just because this generation of players is quickly coming to the end of their careers just due to age and contracts and things of that nature. So enjoy it while you can, but also understand the fact that there might be bumps in the road with some of these players that, might walk, because it's not as fans like to think that the NFL is ran like Madden is on Xbox, where as long as you offer them money, they're going to stay. There's a lot more to these contracts than that. A lot of these guys want to maximize their value. So enjoy this ride while you can, because this team is probably going to look very different, in my opinion, come 2022, 2023, with likely a new quarterback that's probably not on the roster right now, leading the way, with a lot of talent and a lot of key positions that aren't currently on the roster: Sands, Devin Bush, Minka Fitzpatrick, and hopefully TJ Watt. So you have to embrace for that and expect that with these massive changes that would come, the Steelers can afford to kind of control their destiny by adding pieces here and there now. So whenever that window does come, these guys are ready to make the step up and kind of usher in the new generation of Steelers football.
Absolutely. So I think we've beaten that subject. We're not in a point in the process where I think we can even really start talking about players that could be there or won't be there. People are still declaring for the draft.
Okay.
But I think this gives you a good foundation of where they probably are going to look and what they need to look at. But there is actually still football, so we may as well finish this up by looking at these two games that we have this weekend. Joe wanted to make sure everyone is aware that Tony Corrente sucks and that the fix is in, because he believes it'll be a rematch of Super Bowl I, Packers-Chiefs, all because of the centennial year, and that the fix is in, and Tony Corrente will be the one that puts that fix in. I don't like it. I don't think that's what's going to happen. But we got two games, right? We're down to 3 games left in the season, really. The 2 championship games this weekend, and this, of course, the Super Bowl. Titans, Chiefs, Packers, and the 49ers. Let's start with the Titans and the Chiefs. I'm riding the Titans bandwagon now until the wheels fall off. They already beat the Chiefs once. I like Mike Vrabel. He's from the Ohio State University. He never, ever played at that place up north. He's an ex-Steeler. And I mean the other place up north, not the Michigan one. He never played there. I refuse to acknowledge that. So I like the Titans. I want the Titans to win. I think it's actually a cool story to have that 6th seed get all the way there. And while I think Pat Mahomes is going to win a Super Bowl before he's done, I'm just not ready for him to do it yet. So I'm going with the Titans in that game. And then in the other game, I'm really unhappy, and I'll tell you why. I don't want the 49ers to go and win, because then they get 6, right? It's that simple. That's the primary reason I don't want them there. But I am so annoyed about Aaron Rodgers being, the darling of the world, and I have been for years, because I still think he gets more credit than he deserves. So I don't want him to go either. So I would like that game to end in a tie or never ends, and then whoever wins the Titans game and the Chiefs game, it just gets crowned Super Bowl champ. But I think I picked the Packers because it was the lesser of two evils.
So the pragmatic side of me doesn't allow me to pick with emotion. It allows me to pick with, what I think is going to actually happen. And while I'll be cheering for the Titans, because I think, like you said, it's a cool story. I struggle to pick against the Chiefs. I know there's the whole history of them choking in the playoffs. And I think there's a lot of dictation what's going to happen with the game flow. I think if the Titans get out to a lead early, like they did against the Ravens, they'll control the game. Derrick Henry has the ability to just kind of take over a grown man. You want to talk about the ultimate grown-ass man?
No. He is not the ultimate grown-ass man. He is a grown-ass man, but Cam Hayward is the ultimate grown-ass man.
He has to be at least in the conversation of like top 5 because, the stuff he's doing right now is unbelievable.
I'll go with that. Top 5.
Yeah, well, I'll concede. But I think the Titans are going to make an interesting game, but I just think if the Chiefs get out early, I think they're going to want to force Ryan Tannehill to go into an unfriendly confine and win that game on his arm. Not saying he can't do it. He's proven he can do that in games this year, but I just think the Chiefs are to a point to prove people that they belong where they are. I'm picking the Chiefs for that reason. And also, as much as I agree with you, the 49ers, I don't trust the Packers. I haven't trusted the Packers. I think, in my opinion, they're one of the most questionable 13-3 teams I've seen in a while, and that's including the Steelers from 2 years ago. I think realistically you have a team that when they get into a slugfest doesn't always like to rise up to the occasion. I think the 49ers play a very physical brand of football on both sides of the ball. And I think if they're able to get out to a lead early, I really think that they're going to be the ones that run away with it. I think the Packers have a chance to win. I'm not saying they don't. I think they're a good team. I think they deserve to be here. I just think that they don't always want to be in some of these physical matchups like they're going to see this week with the 49ers and then who they would see regardless with the Chiefs or especially the Titans. So for that reason, I think the 49ers just have too much depth. They have too much talent playing at home. I think they have been the team all year. Even when everyone was talking about the Ravens, I think the 49ers have been that team. I'm picking them. So I'm picking a matchup between the Chiefs and the 49ers in the Super Bowl for this season in Miami.
I mean, like I said, I can live with it at this point. The teams that I hated the most are all gone. Ravens, Patriots, I hate them.
It's a nice feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a nice feeling to know that I don't really care who wins, at this point, and I just kind of want it to be entertaining. But I like the Titans story, so I'm riding that bandwagon, like I said. All right, just a couple notes for anybody listening. We got some surprises coming up in some the podcast coming forward, and we're not going to announce them. I'm going to let Joe do that when we get to it. But we got some stuff that hopefully is going to be exciting coming up. Remember, if you want the refs hashtag the refs stink or a hashtag grown ass man T-shirt, they actually exist now. You can either ask us how, or we're going to try and get the links to them on the website or in the pages. But they exist out there. And they're pretty cool. And beyond that, it'll be a fun ride. And I just want to take a moment to again thank the professor for stepping in, educating us with his football prowess and knowledge. And any final thoughts, Mr. Metkler?
Best time of the year, baby. Draft season.
While I understand, no, you're wrong, but but I get it. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. Everybody, remember to like, subscribe, get the bell on, as they say, to be notified when all of our extra cool, wondrous podcasts come back out. And we appreciate the commentary. Even when you tell us we're full of it, I still like it. I like it. Tell me why I'm wrong, and I'll listen, and I'll still tell you you're wrong because I'm always right. But there we go. So that'll wrap it up for us. His name is Zach. He's our little brother from another mother. My name is Brian, and as we always like to say, it's chaos out there, so be kind.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.